you, I mean, you think this could be good for the Republican Party, or necessary? This is a necessary step.
Yeah, let me qualify my answer by saying if you're a Republican, you're disappointed, and the only way to explain this is candidate quality, right? That's the only way to explain what's a 9+ point delta between Brian Kemp's margin and where it looks like Herschel Walker is going to finish this up at. So candidate quality does matter. Look, we've got a lot of work to do. I think Americans wake up all over this country worried about two things. The direction, or Republicans wake up worried about two things. Who's going to take the lead in the party, and what's the economy going to do? People are going to be scared to death tomorrow to lose their job, and they don't know where the Republican Party's headed. We need a leader to show up big time. We need a once-in-a-generation leader to show up that actually understands conservatism, understands the values and the outcomes of making conservative decisions, and truly challenge Joe Biden in 24. If we don't take our medicine here, it's our fault.
I was just emailing with a Republican strategist who was a Walker supporter. And here's what he said. Kemp's ground game with McConnell's money nearly saved what Donald Trump ruined. And he said that every Republican statewide won. What's the difference here? The difference was Donald Trump. And he said, we have to get over this. We just have to get over this dependence. One other thing I want to note is that Ron Klain, the White House Chief of Staff, tonight tweeted that Biden becomes the first president since FDR in 1934 to see every senator of his party who was up for re-election reelected.
Absolutely.
Well, go ahead. Well, one, Scott, I'm going to come back on that.
It was for you.
Thank you. There still were long lines. People still had to wait 2 hours. That's still a form of voter suppression. Just because you win doesn't mean voter suppression doesn't exist. But I'm still excited tonight. And we get to have a senator who I got to meet 8 years ago who was working at Martin Luther King's church fighting for voting rights. And he's going to go back to the United States Capitol and keep fighting. To Van's point, you cannot underestimate the grassroots. It was a 10-year strategy to get Georgia to this point. It will be a battleground forever. The thing that I want Democrats to take note is Georgia doesn't have to be the only one. There are states with diverse populations across this country where people and voters are ignored every single day. And if we invest in organizers and we invest in these groups like Color of Change, like Black PAC, like the AAPI vote, which is the largest voting bloc that is growing in this country, Latino voters, young voters, and independents, we can have a good 24 because it's not just a once-in-a-lifetime leader that gets the economy. It's about getting the American people. And this election cycle, the American people said, I want to know about the economy. I want to know about my constitutional rights. I want to know about democracy. I want to know about education. And they were complex voters that we cannot take for granted anymore.
Well, congrats to you tonight. I just want to note that once again, Donald Trump cost my party Senate seats. I was advising these same Georgia runoffs in 2020 when he lost those seats by, touting the election lies when it was Perdue and Kelly Loeffler. Once again, he put his hand on the scale and put up a candidate who was highly unqualified, Herschel Walker, to be in the U.S. Senate. And so now we are in a position where we have to come around and realize we're losing under him. The fact that in Biden's economy, how poorly the country is doing, the fact that by and large voters, right, left, or center, say we're on the wrong trajectory, yet they're not voting for change. That since 1934, that they have not actually had a part incumbent not lose seats in the Senate. That is an indictment of the Republican Party. We need to wake up because we are losing the moment.
Can I just say something about voters here in this whole midterm election? We saw a lot of split tickets. Yeah. People were voting for candidates. They were not just voting up and down the line. They were taking a look at a candidate's character and experience and saying, I want this person, I'm going to vote for the Republican governor in New Hampshire.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a development in this country. There are a couple of states that are famous for it, Montana being one of them, but it doesn't happen all the time in this country. And now I think this is a great development. People are paying attention because the stakes are so high.
We keep talking about candidate quality.
Yeah.
And we only talk about it on the Republican side, saying they have negative candidate quality. But I just want to say, Reverend Warnock is an extraordinary human being. He's recognizable in our community as somebody who was working hard for people when he wasn't famous, working hard for people when he wasn't in lights, believing in these causes when they were not popular. And so he's somebody who, there's a resonance that he has with people. People believe him. And I don't want it to only be, you had a bad guy on the Republican side. You had a good man on the Democratic side, and that's important.
And he didn't change.
He didn't change.
He could have dragged Herschel Walker through the end zone.
Through the
bad, whatever.
What
Okay.
What do you call it?
But he could have dragged him. There was so much material, but he was a man of character
That part.
and said, I know who I am, and I'm going to run the race today. Now, I did.
I'm gonna let my negative ad
They did run their fair share of negative ads.
Yeah.
I mean, 50, 60, 70 million dollars in character smashing ads. So it wasn't a clean campaign. And
It
fine.
could have been a lot worse.
They did what they had to do. But I think on Van's point, one thing I learned about this entire election, people with personal brands apart from somebody else did well in both parties. Warnock had a brand apart from politics, but the Kemps and the DeWines and the DeSantises and the Abbotts and the Republican Party, they didn't depend on Donald Trump or some other person to define who they are. And I do think this ticket splitting, Gloria, there's something about being able to define and own who you are that people are responding to. They don't want you to be a wholly owned subsidiary of some other person or thing. They just want you to be who you are. And Warnock, I think, got that right in this race. Walker got tagged with Trump, and the candidates in these Senate races that got tagged that way with Trump all across the board lost. And that's a big lesson for the next cycle.
Every Republican in this country ought to hold Donald Trump accountable for this. And I think the part that bothers me the most, and I've spent a lot of time trying to dissect this, is that Donald Trump, it's not out of ignorance or miscalculation. It's out of selfishness. He's not picking these candidates because he thinks it's good for the country or the party. He gave up caring about this country when he lied about the election. He cares about himself, and these candidates that he's picking are pawns. And he's playing a serious game, and he's costing us an economy. As a Republican, I'm watching a crumbling economy. I'm watching a foreign policy. I'm watching a border. These are things I care about for my future, my kids' future. That's why we're all in this game. And we need to hold Donald Trump accountable. And I hope sooner than later he's in the rearview mirror. We need to use this as a pivot point for us to move forward with a GOP 2.0, or call it what you want. We need a new direction that allows us to capitalize on the shortcomings.
And very well said. And I think that I just want to issue the word of caution that we have seen Donald Trump come back from the ashes many times. You know, he did poorly in these midterms, the insurrection, he comes back and is the leader of the party. It needs to be a wake-up moment. The way that you believe in Raphael Warnock, I want candidates on the Republican side that I believe in that way. And that is just not what we put up in some of these races. So it's time to have that moment of, are we going to keep losing with Donald Trump? Or are we going to move on?
You know, the Trump strategy was that the waters would part for him after the midterm elections. And of course, just the opposite has happened.
Yeah.
Not to mention his legal problems, not to mention throwing aside the Constitution, et cetera, et cetera. If Republicans don't have the guts to separate, if not divorce, at this point, I mean Republicans in leadership roles, not rank and file, I mean people leading, then there's a problem. There's a good group of candidates out there, as you were talking about, Scott. The question is where the followers are going to be. And I think followers want to win. If they believe in what the Republican Party stands for, they want to win.
Party leaders, by the way, we've done this historically. Republican Party leaders need to come together and decide how much do we want to lose, or are we willing to band together? And by the way, not run 15 or 20 people in 2024. Put our money and our efforts behind a couple of people who can actually beat him.
But you're going to have to be honest with the voters. You're going to have to say that Donald Trump lied to them. And that means that at times you lied to them too. And I don't know if many Republicans and leaders are going to actually want to do that.
Well, on the Democrats, we should just let that just hang.
Yeah.
Just hang. That was a mic drop.
There's a difference between want to and need to, right? People might not want to say that they made a mistake and they followed down a rabbit trail about an election fraud and conspiracy theories and, you know, all their different nuances in their states, but we need to. To heal and rebuild this party, we need to move past Donald Trump and call it for what it is. It was a mistake, and we need to move on.
But so many the prominent Republicans in the Senate who once opposed Donald Trump, sold their souls in order to curry favor.
And so,
how did they bounce back from that?
I mean, we've been talking about redemption and grace, and I believe in all of that, but this is still politics, right? And so people,
what does that have to do with redemption and grace?
I
want to talk about our party then.
I just don't think people are, the seas haven't parted, but they haven't also drowned Donald Trump. And it's because folks are not sure on where they want to fall. Mm-hmm. And the truth telling that is going to happen around why Donald Trump was able to get these type of candidates to win in primaries and why he was able to get a mob of people to come on January 6th requires some real honesty that I don't know exists in the Republican leadership. Maybe it does. I'm hopeful. For my country, I'm hopeful, but I haven't seen it yet.
I mean, I think he talked about terminating the Constitution a couple of days ago, and there's still a lot of.
I've lived through all these undulations, and you're right. He has come back. I'm telling you, in the last month, something has changed.
Yep.
It
I
does
agree.
feel different.
Something has changed, and you've had a number of people in Washington, but you've got people out in the middle of the country saying, you know what? I'm glad he was there. I like what he did. I voted for the man. I knocked on doors, but I don't want to lose anymore. And I'm tired of carrying this guy's bags. And this has been one of the worst months of his political life. I'm telling you, something has changed. And that's what primaries are for. You're right. That's what primaries are for.
I want to just quickly go over to Jeff Zeleny at Herschel Walker headquarters. Are we going to hear from Walker tonight, Jeff?
We are, Anderson. I'm getting word that Herschel Walker is poised to address his crowd of supporters who are still gathering here. They've been told not to leave this arena here at the College Football Hall of Fame in downtown Atlanta. Certainly a calm air has gone throughout the room here that was a celebratory for really quite a lot of the evening as the lead was seesawing back and forth with Senator Raphael Warnock. But we are expecting Herschel Walker to speak here. I'm told he's been huddling with his advisors and his wife, Julie Blanchard, who's perhaps his closest advisor. Officials I'm speaking to believe he will offer a concession speech, but we certainly will see what he does here behind me here. He's not given any indication that he would not do that. Republicans certainly are talking here about how close this race was, and they do believe it was close because he made this a referendum on Joe Biden. Of course, there will be many recriminations about the type of candidate, the type of campaign he ran, the type of candidate he was. But for now, at least tonight, the final race of this election cycle is over, and one more handpicked candidate by former President Donald Trump has been defeated. So certainly that will be one of the ongoing lessons of this campaign. Even talking to some Republican supporters here, they believe that this was a very winnable race. Look at this very close margin here. They believe this was a race that Republicans could have and should have won. So look for many lessons and recriminations and finger pointing in the hours to come. But for now, at least tonight, we are expecting Herschel Walker to take the stage here. Of course, he rose to prominence in Georgia because of his football fame, and he will deliver perhaps his final speech of his political life here at the College Football Hall of Fame in Atlanta. Anderson.
Jeff Zeleny, thanks. We'll check in back with you as we await Herschel Walker and also Raphael Warnock. Senator Warnock, him will likely speaking tonight. Let's go back to Jake in D.C. Jake.
Anderson, thanks so much. While we wait for possibly Herschel Walker and definitely reelected Senator Raphael Warnock to speak, let's chat some more with our august panel, including, of course, Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat from the great state of Minnesota. Look, obviously, Raphael Warnock, Senator Warnock, ran almost a textbook campaign, and I don't want to take anything from his victory because he did a lot. I have to ask, though, it really seems as though Donald Trump does you guys a favor by picking these candidates for the Republican primaries that are very deferential to him and very supported by the MAGA base, but just lose election after election when it comes to independent, middle of the road, moderate Republican and Democratic voters, whether it's Mastriano and Oz in Pennsylvania, Masters and Kelly Ward in Arizona, and on and on and on. I know you don't want him to run for re-election, but he's constantly doing Democrats favors by picking these candidates that can't win.
I guess I think of it a different way. I think of why can't the Republican Party say goodbye? Why can't the Republican Party stand up to him like Liz Cheney has done, like Adam Kinzinger has done, and at great political risk? In her case, he didn't run again. In her case, she got defeated, but they stood up to him. And I think more people are going to have to do that. And when more people do it, then they actually don't lose. But what's happened here is repeatedly they don't stand up to him. And look at what's happening. You are right. Some of the biggest vote getters in the country were actually people that maybe you didn't hear of. Steve Simon, Secretary of State candidate in Minnesota, who got the most in our state, was running against an election denier. or Fontes in Arizona in Maricopa County, despite Mark Kelly's incredible victory and Katie Hobbs and the like, he did the best in that county. A lot of this has to do with Donald Trump. I agree. But at the same time, I love that we put up candidates that are the real deal. And the state saw through whatever political lens they had, or everything everyone's been through with COVID and inflation all over the world. And they said, you know what? I believe Raphael Warnock is going to have my back, and he's going to help our country, and he's the right guy in terms of our democracy. And that we saw all over the country. Everyone had counted us out. We know this, including maybe a few pundits on this network had counted us out, but we never gave up.
I just wonder, I mean, just a question that I have, you know, in this state of Georgia, the coalition, the Democrats needed to win, you know, suburban women, moderates, independents, Black voters, just voters of color in general. Just a couple of days ago, President Biden said the next nominee for the party, maybe it'll be him, maybe it'll be someone else, but the next nominee of the party needs to be able to prove that they can win voters of color. I just wonder if you agree with that, and if Georgia tonight makes that case very strongly.
Yeah, of course. And I think what you've seen in Georgia is the work of someone who didn't win this time, Stacey Abrams, in building a network and bringing people into the Democratic Party that hadn't voted before. And Raphael and John did the same thing around their state. So that is a big piece of it. But also we've seen across the country that bringing in independent voters, moderate Republicans, particularly on reproductive freedom, when the Republicans doubled down, so many of the people racing to the governor's offices and state capitals on the Republican side to see who could be the first one after the overturn of Roe v. Wade to permanently ban abortion in their states. That was part of this election, and not just in Georgia, but across the country. Democrats stood up for a woman's right to make her own decisions about her health care.
But you know, when you talk about coalitions and where the Democrats are versus the Republicans, we'll see where the demographics of this shake out if we get those numbers. But certainly we saw in the real election in November that this is a real example of Republicans doing well with mostly white voters who don't have a college education, and Democrats doing well with those who do have a college education. And because you have Georgia, which has not just the city, but the suburbs and exurbs.
I want to go to Atlanta right now, where Jeff Zeleny is at Herschel Walker's campaign headquarters. Jeff, I don't know what you're hearing from individuals there about whether or not Mr. Walker is going to come out and speak. Tell us what you're hearing about Herschel Walker's failure.
Jake, I am learning from a senior advisor to the Walker campaign that Herschel Walker will come and address the crowd here before him in just a few moments. And I'm told he will concede this race. I'm told he will concede the race to Senator Raphael Warnock. And it's a race that he described just last night at his final campaign rally as the greatest honor of his life. He said the Heisman Trophy here, of course, from Georgia. Other awards were big, but he said running for public office in his home state of Georgia was the biggest honor of his life. And tonight I'm told he will concede. Now, he has not been a big proponent of election denialism necessarily, but he has not necessarily pushed back on it either. And of course, he was recruited into this race by former President Donald Trump to run. But I'm told he has no appetite for continuing this. He has no appetite for going forward with this race. In fact, the crowd behind me here was watching on the screen on Fox News as they called this race, and just a hush went over the crowd and really not much reaction at all. So there is no sense here, at least, that this is going to go beyond this evening. Perhaps it will in the mind of some supporters who simply cannot accept election results. But Herschel Walker, at least for his part, I'm told will concede here shortly in Atlanta. Jake.
All right, Jeff Zeleny, thank you so much. So if that is in fact what happens, and I want to predicate that with an if, because Herschel Walker has been nothing if not unpredictable. If he does concede, then he will be just the latest in a string of election-denying candidates who support Donald Trump's election lies who themselves have run, gotten the nominations because of Donald Trump, and then lost and have conceded.
Yeah.
There are a couple exceptions in Arizona, Kerry Lake and Mark Fincham. Both are out there doing their unhinged thing. But most of the election deniers that Trump picked, ran, lost, have actually conceded, which I think is an important thing.
Yeah, we have seen that. Saw that in Nevada. Adam Laxalt, who was the state attorney general who tried to push to overturn the election results, he conceded. We saw Mehmet Oz concede in Pennsylvania. Blake Masters also denied the election results in 2020. He conceded. Let's see if Herschel Walker decides to do that here. But this moment is going to just prompt such a significant amount of soul searching among Republicans about exactly what they did wrong here and how to avoid this next time. Next time they'll have a more favorable map. They can certainly take back the Senate majority, but they could also fail again if they nominate candidates who are lackluster. These are races Republicans are just beating themselves up. They are races that they know they could have won. They left on the table, and now they're on the 51.
They didn't have a horrible map in 2022 this year at all. I mean, they were convinced that they were going to take a seat in Nevada. They didn't. They thought that they were to take a seat in Georgia. They didn't. And the list goes on and on. So you're right. I mean, the soul searching is already underway, right? Even before, because of all the other losses, in the fact that they didn't do as well as they thought in the House, and then other losses in the Senate. But the fact that, just to go back to the point that Jeff was making in his reporting and that you made, if he does concede, the fact that we're here where we praise somebody for conceding, which is the norm, is sad. But because that is where we are, and because he is a Trump-backed candidate in the state of Georgia, if he does, it is noteworthy.
It is a good thing that normal is winning in terms of the norms of our democracy coming back into fashion. And the reality is that the only person who thought they could get away with not conceding an election that they clearly lost was Donald Trump. That's the reality of it. He tried to make it a trend, but it was not a trend. And I think tonight, if Herschel Walker concedes, it will be really incredibly telling about how far this stuff really goes, which is, the answer is really not very far. The American public is pretty tired of this stuff. I mean, when we look back at the midterm election results, voters were so dissatisfied with the economy, so dissatisfied with both political parties, but also dissatisfied with the state of our politics. And they said so by rejecting some of the most extreme figures that were out there, who were running on things that were just not palatable to where the average American was. And Republicans right now, there's so many Republicans on Capitol Hill who are just shouting, please listen to that message. And it's still, I think, as we sit here, an open question whether or not the party writ large will, as we go into a presidential cycle and as we go into another midterm.
I wanted to say something on Herschel Walker. Yes, I agree with you 100%. He shouldn't get brownie points for doing a normal thing, for conceding, which is what adults do in elections. This is a guy who was not a good person. Herschel Walker, I mean, now that it's over, I think I can say this, conveyed to voters in Georgia that he regularly would impregnate all sorts of women and either pay for their abortions or abandon their children. Period. That's not how Christian Republicans voted for him is beyond me. And I suspect we're going to hear in the coming days that a lot of them didn't, or just didn't vote. Jeff Duncan, the lieutenant governor, said the other day, the Republican lieutenant governor, who is a serious Christian conservative, said he couldn't vote. He just went into the ballot. They went into the vote, and there's only one election. He went in there and didn't vote. The man, and I think he lost the election when his son, Christian Walker, did I think it was a TikTok video or an Instagram video talking about,
and he's responding right now too,
talking about how his father had abandoned him. And we know there were at least 3 other children like that Herschel Walker abandoned.
And can I just say, in the birthplace of the American civil rights movement, there's a reason that Raphael Warnock ended his campaign leaning into this idea that Herschel Walker was an insult to Georgia voters, but he was also talking directly to Black voters who felt that by Republicans basically picking the most popular most well-known name of a Black Republican and putting them out there, that was an insult to Black voters who expected more from their candidates. That was part of the pitch from the Warnock campaign at the end. And I think it matters because in Georgia, voting matters, especially to Black voters who fought and bled and died for the right to be able to do it. And that's why I think you saw the turnout the way that it was and the lines as long as they were and the turnout among Black voters for Democrats as high as it was.
Let's bring in Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, who's on our panel. And Jeff, I apologize, but as a father, I find it just so appalling to see somebody behave the way that Herschel Walker did to his kids, just abandoning them, not being part of their lives, and then running as a Christian, running as an observant man. But you tell us, you went into the voting booth and you didn't vote.
Well, I just want to make sure we clear the record. I walked in the line, stood there like everybody else did, and I knew exactly what I was going to do because nobody had earned my vote. I walked in, opened up the machine, saw 2 names. Neither one of them had earned my support, hit print, and walked the empty ballot up to the scanner and walked out of the booth. It was unfortunate. I wanted to get there. I'm a Republican. I've been a conservative my entire life. I've probably been a conservative a lot longer than Herschel Walker or Donald Trump combined. And so it matters to me, but it's certainly, this is part of the process, Jake. I didn't go in there lightheartedly. I didn't go in there to make a news story. I went in there to start making a difference and to be bold enough to be able to look forward instead of looking backwards. And if we're Republicans and we're serious about winning the White House and winning majorities, we're going to have to look forward instead of backwards.
So you weren't going to vote for Raphael Warnock because he is a progressive Democrat and you're a conservative Republican. Absolutely. Why didn't you vote for Herschel Walker?
Well, yeah, I've said this along the way. He didn't earn my respect or my vote throughout the process. I mean, was it the part that he actually lived in Texas and tried to call Georgia home? Is it the fact that he never articulated a single conservative policy position, not one single one? Was it that he took on the allegations about his personal behavior by calling everybody a liar? Or if you just add them all together, that's why I got to that point.
So obviously Governor Brian Kemp, who was overwhelmingly reelected in November on the same ticket where neither Warnock nor Walker were able to get 50%. Obviously, he did a lot to try to help bring Walker across the finish line. The message seemed to basically be a partisan message of we need Republicans representing us in the U.S. Senate. Did that bother you? Did you think Governor Kemp was wrong to do that?
No, Governor Kemp has earned the right to endorse anybody he wants to. And certainly, Governor Kemp's why this race was as close as it is, right? I mean, it's going to be within a couple of points. And I think a major part of that is Brian Kemp. But I want Republicans all over the country to look at Brian Kemp and see what he's done and model their campaigns, model their political futures after what he did. He simply got up every day for a year and pointed to his record. He pointed to conservative policies like how we handled COVID, how we dealt with a growing economy.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. We'll come back to you, but here's Herschel Walker.
Thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And also I'm going to acknowledge my wife, Julie, because she's with me and she's been through a tough time. But I want to say that I want to thank all of you as well because we've had a tough journey, have we not? But one of the things I said is when they called the race, I said the numbers doesn't look like they're going to add up. But one of the things I want to tell all of you is you never stop dreaming. I don't want any of you to stop dreaming. I don't want any of you to stop believing in America. I want you to believe in America and continue to believe in the Constitution and believe in our elected officials most of all. Continue to pray for them because all the prayers you've given me, I felt those prayers. I want to thank all my team as well, Team Herschel, because they put up with a lot. I want to thank Team Herschel. Thank all my donors as well, because you guys, without you, I couldn't have done what I've done. So I want to thank all of you as well, because there's no excuses in life. And I'm not going to make any excuses now because we put up one heck of a fight. And I said, that's what we got to do, because this is much bigger. This is much bigger than Herschel Walker. And I told someone this the other day. I said, you guys, I've done a lot of stuff. You talk about Heisman Trophy, you talk about all the athletic awards, business awards I won. But the best thing I've ever done in my whole entire life is run for the Senate seat right here. And the reason I'm going to say that is I got a chance to meet all you and to hear what you guys feel about this country. And I got a chance for you guys to tell me what you do feel about this country. I got a chance to go into your homes, got a chance that you invested in Herschel Walker. And I thank you. And I thank you so much. And as I said, we can't blame no one, because I want you to continue to believe in this country, believe in our elected officials, and most of all, stay together. Don't let anyone separate you. Don't let anyone tell you that we can't, because I'm here to tell you we can. And I'm here to tell you we can. And as I said early on, God is good. And he's a good God. All the time, he's a good God. So I want to say, I'm never going to stop fighting for Georgia. I'm never going to stop fighting for you, because you're my family. Because I always, I'm a winner. And we're all winners. So we're all winners. And that's what I want to say. We're all winners. And I want to say, God is a good God. God bless you guys. And let me say, stay together. Continue to believe in our elected official. Always, always cast your vote, no matter whatever is happening. Cast your vote for all that. And God we trust. I do. In God we trust. Continue to cast your vote. Never, never, never give up. All right. God bless you guys. Thank you, guys. And thank you.
Republican Senate candidate Herschel Walker conceding defeat, saying that his losing Senate campaign is the achievement he is most proud of, conceding, which is significant for somebody who at one point was engaged in spreading Donald Trump's election lies. And in fact, Manu Raju, while we wait for the winner of the election, Raphael Warnock, to come out and give his celebration speech, we should note that after Donald Trump lost the state of Georgia, Herschel Walker was among those retweeting Donald Trump's election lies and attacking Brian Kemp and Secretary of State Raffensperger, two conservative Republicans who were resoundingly reelected last month.
Yeah, I mean, look, Herschel Walker would not be here if it were not for Donald Trump. He was a supporter of Donald Trump during the 2020 election campaign. Herschel Walker lived in Texas. He was not even in Georgia. It wasn't because he wasn't going to run until Trump pushed him into the race and essentially got Republican base behind him, essentially led to Mitch McConnell endorsing him. There would have been a much different candidate, potentially a different result if it were not for Donald Trump. And that is one of the things that Republicans are just going to have to grapple with going forward. How do you deal with Donald Trump's hand-picked candidates? Because we have seen in race after race after race this cycle, they cost them key seats and the Senate majority.
And I mean, there are, not to put too fine a point on it, but there are a number of Democrats who were reelected or elected who were vulnerable. I'm from Pennsylvania. It was almost just a truism that if a Democrat was in the White House, a Republican would be elected governor and vice versa. And yet Democrat Josh Shapiro is the new governor-elect because Donald Trump got involved and there was a MAGA candidate named Doug Mastriano who was unelectable statewide. And it was over and over, Michigan, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, on and on.
Yeah, I mean, I think Arizona and Nevada are two case in points. Those were two top targets for Republicans, and Democrats won both of those races. And now they've won yet another Senate seat in the deep South. This is a real moment for Republicans to figure out how they are going to proceed forward. And it goes beyond Donald Trump at this point, because it's not just Trumpism, it's also a lot of Trump voters who are where Trump is and maybe even beyond that at a certain point. And that is what's pushing the party so far to the right that they're not able to get out of these primaries unscathed with a candidate who can really survive in a general election. Their primary process is a huge part of the problem here. It's making them vulnerable. It's making them unpalatable in the suburbs. It's making them unpalatable to a lot of these emerging, voters of color who are decisive in states like Nevada and Arizona and Georgia. These are big problems, and they're going to persist even beyond.
They couldn't get Jeff Duncan's vote. Yeah. The very conservative Christian lieutenant governor of Georgia went to vote, and Herschel Walker was such a horrible candidate he couldn't go for. Well, let's go to where Jeff Duncan is. Anderson.
Jake, thanks so much. Jeff, what is the message for? I'm going to ask what is the message for the Democrats here and for Republicans? Jeff, what is the message for Republicans?
Well, one, I want to thank Herschel Walker for that concession speech. That was one of the classiest speeches I've heard from either Democrat or Republican. And I appreciate it. And things like that are going to help make this a better country as we continue to move forward. Look, it's a wake-up call for both parties, right? There's a vacuum of leadership of epic proportion. When I walk into a room to give a speech, I oftentimes say, raise your hand if you think the political system's broken. And everybody raises their hand. This is a wake-up call for America, right? Our problems are starting to mount: economic problems, international problems, border problems, you name it, we've got challenges. And so this country needs leadership. This is a pivot point for Republicans, my party. We need to pick up in a new direction. We need to pick new leaders that have a vision. And I think this is an important part of that step, unfortunately.
Just because Republicans are dumb doesn't make Democrats smart. I do think it's important for us to look in the mirror. We're going to hear from one of the great leaders. I think we have some real leadership. We're going to hear from it tonight when he gives his victory speech, Reverend Warnock. But just because Republicans have done dumb stuff doesn't make Democrats smart. And there is a danger that we get too triumphalist about what just happened. He should have been beat by 50 points. He should have been beat by 80 points. The kind of campaign that he put on and the kind of character he showed, he shouldn't have been supported by anybody. And yet, you couldn't bring yourself to vote for Warnock, and people did bring themselves to vote for him. So I think Democrats have to look in the mirror. I think we got lucky, and we earned the luck by working hard and putting forward great people. So that's some earned luck in there. But I think going forward, had the tides gone differently, had you not had that abortion decision, had you not had some of these wackadoodle candidates from Donald Trump, and we were sitting in the penalty box, what we'd be saying? We'd be saying some of this woke stuff has gone too far. We'd be saying, some of our inability to really bring people in who are working class in a great way is not where it needs to be. So there are problems and faults and flaws in our party. I want to make sure that we fix those because 2024 is around the corner.
I have to say, I disagree with you a little bit.
Talk to me.
I think that both parties need to do an evaluation, and Democrats did get lucky in some instances. I also think, though, that Democrats wanted a fighter. They wanted candidates that were going to go out and be like, we're not going to be bullied by Donald Trump. We're not going to be bullied by insurrectionists. We're going to stand up for our democracy. We're going to try and get legislation passed, even if we can't get over the 60 vote threshold in the Senate. And then Joe Biden did take some action. I'm not going to lie. Dobbs was monumental in this election. Gun violence was monumental in this election, but it was talking about all of it. And I think that, when Joe Biden told people on the campaign trail when we were on in 2020 and said, we're going to address student loan debt, we didn't solve the whole problem, that we're going to take a step forward and you actually deliver on politics. That's what people want. When you make a promise, you keep it. And when politicians don't, that's why people feel like it's broken. And I think if Republicans, now that they have the House, if they go down this path with investigations and oversight and not delivering for the American people, I think we're going to be having a similar conversation in 2024 if Dems keep the word they ran on in this cycle.
Well, and I think you hit on something very important, and the Lieutenant Governor did as well, which is the fact that we're even commending a candidate for conceding at a loss shows how far the GOP has gotten outside of the mainstream. So you had two firm election deniers in Doug Mastriano and in Herschel Walker, who showed more integrity, more honesty, and more class than the former president did by acknowledging reality and the truth that they lost the election. All right, great, step in the right direction. But to your point, we now have a split government, which I actually think is a good thing for democracy and for the country. But it's a moment for House Republicans to recognize this was not a mandate for Republicans. No. We squeaked by just by a hair that Kevin McCarthy, whoever the leader ends up being, the speaker ends up being. This is a moment to govern and to actually deliver and to do things like try to lower gas prices, try to, bring down bills for average Americans, secure the border. And I worry that lesson's not going to be heard because they're still going to be so held hostage to Trump.
And I'm going to agree with Van because I don't think it was a mandate for Democrats either. I think Democrats won a lot of races in a very close way because they had better candidates. They worked so hard, as you guys are talking about. But as you look into the future, they've got 20 plus candidates. What is it? Up in 2024, they have 21 Democratic seats up. And they got to get their act together, too, if they want to keep control of the Senate. We don't know if Joe Biden's going to run or not. I mean, my guess now is that he's going to run, but who is he going to run against? And what you're talking about, Van, is the Democratic Party sort of overdoing it and overstepping it. And maybe they need to take a look and kind of rejigger and move back to the center, which is what Joe Biden ran and won on in the first place. And people say, he overinterpreted his mandate and he governed as a liberal.
We're going to keep the conversation going. I just want to point out Senator Raphael Warnock is now on stage. We're obviously going to bring you his comments live, but we'll continue until he...
But I think people voted for candidates because they wanted to believe what they were saying and agree with them and wanted them to do something.
I think there's plenty of worry for both parties. I think both parties need new leadership in 2024. I think the American people are tired of these parties backing in to these races. They're looking to affirmatively be led. They don't get it out of Trump. I don't really think they're getting it out of Biden. New leadership is needed, and the American people want it.
Well, hello, everybody. Y'all settle down now. Settle down. Thank you, Georgia. Thank you. I love you too. All right, y'all settle down. I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, and to God be the glory. For the great things that God has done. And after a hard-fought campaign, or should I say campaigns, it is my honor to utter the four most powerful words ever spoken in a democracy. The people have spoken. I often say that a vote is a kind of prayer for the world we desire for ourselves and for our children. Voting is faith put into action. And Georgia, you have been praying with your lips and your legs. With your hands and your feet, your heads and your hearts. You have put in the hard work, and here we are standing together. I want to say thank you. And I I want to say thank you to my mother who is here tonight. You'll see her in a little while. But she grew up in the 1950s in Waycross, Georgia, picking somebody else's cotton and somebody else's tobacco. But tonight she helped pick her youngest son to be a United States Senator. My dad has long passed into the light, but he is still very much with us. I watched my dad, a pastor and a small businessman, take care of his family by working really hard with his hands and using his brain. And he picked up old junk cars and loaded them on the back of a rig that the mechanisms of which he designed himself, one on top of the other. And that's how he took care of his family. But on Sunday morning, the man who lifted broken cars lifted broken people. And convinced them of their value. I would not be here were it not for them. I am a proud son of Savannah, Georgia. A coastal city known for its verdant town squares and its cobblestone streets. Tall, majestic oak trees, dripping with Spanish moss, bend and beckon the love of history and horticulture to this city by the sea. My roots, like the roots of those oak trees, go deep down into the soil of Savannah and Waycross and Scriven County and Burke County. I am Georgia. I am an example and an iteration of its history, of its pain and its promise, of the brutality and the possibility. But because this is America, and because we always have a path to make our country greater against unspeakable odds, here we stand together. Thank you, Georgia. I want to thank my mother and my late father. I want to thank my siblings who are here. I'm one of 12 in my family. Clearly, my folks read the Bible, be fruitful and multiply. Our family was short on money, but long on love, long on faith. And I want to thank my two darling children. Chloe and Caleb, whose brilliance and whose eyes inspired me to work for all of our children. Georgia, I don't want you to miss what you've done. In a moment in which there were folk trying to divide our country, and those forces are very much at work right now, Georgia did an amazing thing. In 2021, it sent its first African-American senator and its first Jewish senator to the United States Senate in one fell swoop. And you have done it again. Thank you, Georgia. Now, there are those who will look at the outcome of this race and say that, yes, you're right, we won. But there are those who would look at the outcome of this race and say that there's no voter suppression in Georgia. Let me be clear. Just because people endured long lines that wrapped around buildings, some blocks long, just because they endured the rain and the cold and all kinds of tricks in order to vote, doesn't mean that voter suppression does not exist. It simply means that you, the people, have decided that your voices will not be silenced. Let us not forget that when we entered this runoff, a vestige of the ugly side of our complicated American story, state officials said that we couldn't vote on Saturday. But we sued them and we won. And the people once again rose up in a multiracial, multi-religious coalition of conscience. You endured the rain, you endured the long lines, and you voted, and you did it because you believe, as I do, that democracy is the political enactment of a spiritual idea. This notion that each of us has within us a spark of the divine, that we were created in the imago Dei, in the image of God. And if you're not given to that kind of religious language, that's fine. Our tent is big. Simply put it this way, each of us has value. And if we have value, we ought to have a voice. And the way to have a voice is to have a vote to determine the direction of your country and your destiny within it. And so we stand here tonight on broad shoulders. Our ballot is a bloodstained ballot. We stand here on the shoulders of the martyrs, Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, two Jews and an African American who lost their lives fighting for that great American right to vote. Viola Luiso and James Reed, white sister and a white brother who also lost their lives. Fannie Lou Hamer, that indomitable Mississippi sharecropper. And my parishioner, God bless his memory, John Lewis, who one day crossed the bridge, knowing that there was danger on the other side, and yet he crossed that bridge while building a bridge for the future. And now it is on us, the latest generation of Americans and of Georgians, to keep building that bridge, to keep walking that long walk, pushing the nation towards our ideals. And so, Georgia, this is my promise to you. The work that we must do is difficult. The issues are not simple, they're complex. But here's my promise to you. I will walk with you even as I work for you. Because here is what I've learned as a pastor. You can't lead the people unless you love the people. You can't love the people unless you know the people, and you can't know the people unless you walk among the people. You cannot serve me if you cannot see me. And so during these difficult days, even as I work on specific public policy proposals and I offer bills and work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to get those bills passed, I just want you to know that I see you. I see you parents as you're trying to put your kids through college and through community college and technical college. I see you students as you're trying to make a way out of no way. I see you essential workers fighting for a livable wage to participate in the prosperity that you create for others. Farmers who are an answer to our most basic daily bread, and yet they struggle to hold on to the farm. Farmers, I see you, and I'm here with you. And together we can work through all of these issues. And I want all of Georgia to know whether you voted for me or not. I get it. But I want all of Georgia to know, whether you voted for me or not, that every single day I am going to keep working for you. I'm proud of the bipartisan work I've done, and I intend to do more because I actually believe that at the end of the day, we are all Americans. I believe in that American covenant. E pluribus unum. And it is that covenant that drives me to work to lower costs, to lower the cost of prescription drugs, to create jobs all across our state, to address the issue of criminal justice reform. Because I believe that you can have justice and safety at the same time. So thank you for this high honor. After a hard-fought campaign, you got me for 6 more years. Thank you. So let me quickly do a couple of things. I want to thank my amazing campaign staff. Led by
Listen to Raphael Warnock, Senator, re-elected tonight, as CNN has projected in the runoff against Herschel Walker. Van Jones, you can certainly see his influence as a preacher, the cadences with which he speaks.
Yeah, beautiful. And, I was noticing it's hard not to smile. Even my Republican colleagues, when his presence, he just brings a smile. You can tell this is a good man. And he means what he says. And I thought that frame, I see you. And he started talking to all the people who just don't feel seen, the people who work hard every day, the people who don't have very much. I think it's a blessing. I was just happy to see something kind on the air. We have so many shootings and Nazis and stuff like that. Just to let somebody who came up out of the community, who's worked so hard, who's been there for us, to go through not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 elections in 2 years for one job. Bill's brother wants that job. He wants that job. And I think you can feel he's going to do a good job.
I think we heard two good speeches tonight, and not grievance-filled, and talking about bipartisanship and working across the aisle, and together we can work through these issues. I thought it was kind of remarkable and refreshing.
Jeff, what did you?
Well, one, congratulate Senator Warnock. I can't imagine how tired he is. And to your point, I mean, the guy's been campaigning for what feels like a decade. I'm sure he's going to sleep well tonight. But, he's got his work cut out for him. I couldn't help be reminded listening to that speech, he could have made it easier on himself, too. If he would have had more of a Joe Manchin voting record along the way, instead of just being 100% or 96 or 98%, that would have been a closer fit to Georgia. But he won the race, and congratulations to him. And we've got our work cut out as Republicans. We'll have another Senate seat on the table in 4 years.
Ashley?
Listening to his speech and honestly listening to Herschel Walker's speech, you might not know which party they were from tonight. And that was refreshing. I'm in the business of building coalitions, and I really appreciated what Senator Warnock said tonight about building bridges. He feels like not a transition candidate, but the next generation for our party. He talked about his parishioner, John Lewis. This man preaches at Martin Luther King's church in a time when I wasn't even thought of. And to see what is possible in this country, it gives me hope as a older millennial, the next generation, for him to speak to them, to speak to working class, to talking about how his mother picked cotton. In this country, we often think about how far we have come, but our history is very recent. And if we have leaders like Warnock in office who are willing to build bridges, who are willing to be bipartisan, who are willing to represent all of Georgia, which he has promised to do, it gives me hope for this country. And nights like tonight, I want to bottle up and remember, because it won't always be this moment of feeling. And so we need to remember nights like this, because this is what America's about.
I thought it was so important that he mentioned the martyrs by name.
By name.
When we say this is Georgia, for us, we know what that means. We know that people literally were murdered, people were literally beaten, people were literally killed, black and white, just to have a black person to be able to vote, let alone go to the U.S. Senate, and that he gave the honor to Fannie Lou Hamer. He gave the honor to John Lewis.
Looking at his mom being brought,
and to his mother, who you just so beautifully mentioned. I just think it's important because we assume that everybody knows when we say this is Georgia. He made sure that everybody did. There are martyrs that gave their lives for this moment.
And I think it was important that he mentioned bipartisanship in this speech tonight. He does have a strong voting record of being with President Biden pretty consistently, but he's got his work cut out for him. The job begins tomorrow. Well, it begins in January in the Senate, and there are major must-pass bills, and Democrats have a very slim majority. So it is going to require, for him to be a successful senator who's going to represent the whole state of Georgia, he's going to need to reach across the aisle, and I hope that he means that.
One thing about tonight and this entire midterm, pretty well-run election across the board. Very few problems. It did take a long time to count some votes out west, and we really only had one state where somebody's, kind of throwing a fit about a clear outcome. There were a lot of predictions that we were going to have another 2020-style meltdown. That did not happen. And so for all the county clerks and precinct workers and everybody else who runs elections in America, which I'm a strong supporter of the diffused election system we have. All these people that some of them are volunteers or get very low pay and they take these jobs, they are in the crosshairs of a lot of controversy, but we had a pretty well-run election. And tonight, we had a gracious winner, we had a gracious loser. If you think that American democracy was damaged somehow after 2020 and you were wondering what was going to happen here, I would think no matter what party you're in, this whole election should have given you some heart that when push comes to shoves, America will get it right. The American people will get it right. And we did.
Even some of the most extreme candidates on the right who were running lost. Arizona perhaps is the outlier on this, but Mastriano and others conceded.
Absolutely. And they taught the Republican Party a lesson. They taught Donald Trump a lesson. And you just got to hope the momentum of respecting the outcomes of democratic elections will continue.
Stay with us for more reaction to Senator Warnock's re-election victory, what it means for both parties with the 2024 presidential race around the corner. Our special coverage continues right after this.
Zoom IT News et Caribbean Television Network, plus de 10 sites Internet. en anglais, français, espagnol et plus d'une centaine d'autres langues. Désormais, vous n'avez plus besoin d'un ordinateur ou d'un téléphone portable. Il suffit de demander à Alexa.
Alexa, what are the latest news from the Caribbean Television Network?
From Caribbean Television Network News. From Zoom Haiti News Daily.
En Zoom Haiti News, français.
En Zoom Haiti News espagnol.
Caribbean Television Network, en français, anglais et espagnol. Vous pouvez aussi télécharger les applications de Zoom Haiti News en créole, français, anglais et espagnol. Visitez notre site internet sur www.caribbeantelevisionnetwork.com.
Alexa, what are the latest news from the Caribbean Television Network?
From Caribbean Television Network News. Even in his inability to lead, Ariel Henry enjoys the support of the United States. From Zoom Haiti News Daily. The Assistant Secretary of State for International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, Todd D. Robinson, reiterated the United States' support for the Haitian government in the fight against insecurity.
Zoom Haiti News, français. L'ex-ministre de l'Agriculture, des Ressources naturelles et du Développement rural, David Nicolas, est mort.
En Zoom Haiti News espagnol. El gobierno de Biden agradece la colaboración de las autoridades haitianas en la gestión del expediente de migrantes irregulares devueltos al país.
Chaque jour, branchez Zoom Haiti News ak Caribbean Television Network sous Roku ak Amazon TV5. Ou joindre nous tous sous ZHN Live ak CTN Live dans Roku ak Amazon TV5. Ou pas gain télévision? Al droite sous Apple Store ou bien Google Store, téléchargez l'application Roku. L'offre télécharger l'application ça, ou chercher ZHN Live. Ou joindre même channel ça tout dans Amazon TV5. Pas hésiter à abonner à la chaîne YouTube nous. Et puis suivez nous tous sur Facebook dans Zoom Haiti News à Caribbean Television Network. Zoom Haiti News et Caribbean Television Network, plus de 10 sites internet en anglais, français, espagnol et plus d'une centaine d'autres langues. Désormais, vous n'avez plus besoin d'un ordinateur ou d'un téléphone portable. Il suffit de demander à Alexa.
Alexa, what are the latest news from the Caribbean Television Network?
From Caribbean Television Network News. From Zoom Haiti News Daily.
En Zoom Haiti News, français.
En Zoom Haiti News espagnol.
Caribbean Television Network, en français, anglais et espagnol. Vous pouvez aussi télécharger les applications de Zoom Haiti News en créole, français, anglais et espagnol. Visitez notre site internet sur www.caribbeantelevisionnetwork.com.